The locksmith would not look her in the eye. That was how Caroline knew her husband had paid him extra, not just to change the locks, but to feel nothing while doing it. She was 8 months pregnant, standing in the driveway of her own home, watching strangers carry her furniture into unmarked trucks.
Look at this clause right here.
Her credit cards were dead.
They backdated the
her phone
filing.
was disconnected. Her car was driven away by a man who never said a word to her. Her billionaire ex-husband had planned this for 6 weeks. He filed for divorce the same day they found out their baby was a girl. He held her hand at the ultrasound. He cried tears of joy.
The evidence clearly shows that
and he
Mr.
had
Pemberton
already signed the
prioritized
papers.
profit over
He took
safety,
everything,
knowingly
the
endangering
house,
countless
the money,
lives.
the
She named
future.
my own.
He left her with one suitcase and a text message that said, "You were never built for this life." He expected her to beg. He expected her to crawl back and accept whatever crumbs he offered. He expected her to break. But Caroline had something he never saw coming, a document, left behind by the one person who knew exactly what his son would become, his own father. And when she showed that document in court, it did not just change the case. It destroyed everything Grant Pemberton thought he was. This is that story. Lesson and value. This story is not about revenge. It is about a woman who lost everything and discovered that the one thing no one could take from her was herself. If you have ever been underestimated, silenced, or made to feel invisible, this story is your reminder. You are not what they took from you. You are what remains after they tried. If this story touched something real inside you, leave a comment and tell us. Your words remind us why we do this. Hit that like button so others can find this story when they need it most. Share it with someone who needs to hear that starting over is not the end. It is the beginning. And if you are not subscribed yet, join us. We tell stories that stay with you long after the last word.
The locksmith would not look her in the eye. That was how Caroline Ashford knew her husband had paid him extra. Not just to change the locks, but to feel nothing while doing it. She stood in the driveway of her own home, 12,000 square feet of Georgian brick and imported limestone. The home she had decorated room by room over 6 years. The home where she had planted hydrangeas along the west wall because Grant said he liked the color blue. Grant lied about a lot of things. Maybe he lied about the hydrangeas, too. 2 men in gray uniforms carried her grandmother's china cabinet through the front door. They loaded it into a white truck with no logo, no company name, just a white truck swallowing her life one piece at a time. Caroline was 8 months pregnant. Her daughter kicked against her ribs as she watched a stranger carry out the rocking chair she had bought for the nursery they had painted pale yellow together 3 months ago. Grant had put his hand on her belly that day and said their daughter was going to have her eyes. She wondered now if he had already filed the papers by then. A security guard she had never seen before walked towards her across the gravel. He was young, maybe 25. He held a manila envelope, the way someone holds a dead bird, away from his body, like it might contaminate him. "Mrs. Pemberton," he said. "Ashford," she corrected. She did not know why that mattered right now, but it did. He handed her the envelope. Inside were divorce papers, finalized, signed by a judge she had never heard of. The date on the filing was 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. Grant had held her hand at the ultrasound 6 weeks ago. He had cried when the technician said it was a girl. He had cried, and he had already filed. Caroline's phone buzzed. She looked down. No service. The account had been disconnected. She pressed the home button anyway. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock. The screen glowed and dimmed. Glowed and dimmed. She kept pressing it because stopping meant the silence would win. A black sedan pulled into the driveway. A man in a polo shirt stepped out and walked to her car. Her silver Range Rover, leased under Grant's company. The man did not speak to her. He simply got in, started the engine, and drove it away. She stood in the driveway holding a dead phone and a manila envelope. 8 months pregnant. No car, no house, no money. The July sun pressed down on her shoulders like a hand. The locksmith finished his work. He walked past her to his van. For 1 second, their eyes met. He looked away first. Caroline walked to the neighbor's house. Mrs. Delacroix, 72 years old, a retired school teacher who always waved from her garden. Caroline knocked on the door and asked to use the phone. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. She called Tessa. Tessa Whitmore arrived in 38 minutes. She drove a Honda Civic that smelled like vanilla air freshener and old scrubs from the hospital. Tessa was a nurse. She was also the only person in the world Caroline trusted completely. Tessa found Caroline sitting on the curb outside the estate, one suitcase beside her. The security guard had let her take one suitcase. Caroline had packed it in 4 minutes. She chose the things that mattered: baby clothes, her mother's ring, a photograph of her father. She left everything Grant had ever given her. Tessa did not say anything. She picked up the suitcase, put it in the trunk, and opened the passenger door. They drove in silence for 14 minutes. Caroline counted the streetlights. 1, 2, 3. She stopped at 14 because that was when the tears started. Tessa reached over and turned on the radio. Low, just enough sound to fill the space between them. A song Caroline did not recognize. Something soft with acoustic guitar. They were almost to Tessa's apartment when Tessa said quietly, "Caroline, the filing date on those papers." 6 weeks ago, Caroline said. 6 weeks ago was your ultrasound, the one where you found out she was a girl. Caroline pressed her hand against her belly. Her daughter turned inside her, a slow roll like a wave. "He held my hand," Caroline said. "He cried, Tessa. He cried." Tessa's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. She did not respond. Some things do not have responses. At Tessa's apartment, Caroline sat on the couch and stared at the wall. The wall had a small crack in the plaster that looked like a river seen from an airplane. She studied it the way a person studies something when their brain has decided to stop processing anything real. Tessa made tea. Chamomile. She set it on the coffee table and sat beside Caroline without touching her. At 11:47 that night, Caroline's old phone buzzed one final time. A text message that had been queued before the service was cut from Grant. It read, "You will thank me eventually. You were never built for this life." Caroline read it 3 times. Then she set the phone face down on the table. She picked up the cold chamomile tea and drank it in one long swallow. She was not going to thank him. She was not going to beg. She did not know yet what she was going to do. But she knew, with the certainty of a woman who had just lost everything, that Grant Pemberton had made a mistake. He had assumed that taking everything from her meant she had nothing left. He was wrong. She still had herself. The first 3 days at Tessa's apartment moved like syrup, slow and thick and hard to swallow. Caroline slept on the pull-out couch in the living room. The mattress had a spring that pressed into her lower back, which was already aching from the pregnancy. She did not complain. Complaining required energy she did not have. On the first morning, she tried her credit cards. All 4 of them. Declined. She called the banks from Tessa's phone. Every account had been closed or frozen. A woman at Chase Manhattan told her, in a voice that was professionally sympathetic, that all joint accounts had been converted to individual accounts under Grant Pemberton's name 8 weeks prior. 8 weeks. He had started this before he filed. On the second morning, Caroline tried to find a lawyer. She sat at Tessa's kitchen table with a legal pad and a cup of decaf coffee and called every family law firm in Greenwich, then Stamford, then Bridgeport. The first firm said they had a conflict of interest. Grant Pemberton was a client. The second firm said the same thing. The third firm said they were not accepting new cases. The fourth firm's receptionist paused for a long time after Caroline gave her name. Then she whispered, "Mrs. Pemberton, No one in this city will take your case against him. I am sorry." The line went dead. Caroline stared at the phone. She felt something she had not felt since childhood. The specific helplessness of being small in a world designed for people bigger than you. On the third morning, she tried to update her resume. She opened Tessa's laptop, created a new document, and typed her name at the top, Caroline Ashford. Then she stared at the blinking cursor. It blinked 11 times per minute. She knew this because she counted for 11 minutes before she closed the laptop. She had not worked in 6 years. She had a law degree from Columbia. She had graduated in the top 15% of her class. She had been offered a position at a firm in Manhattan that handled corporate mergers. The starting salary was $140,000. Grant had convinced her not to take it. Not with force, not with anger, with charm, with logic that sounded like love. Why would you grind away at a desk when we could travel the world together? I want to give you everything, Caro. Let me take care of you. She let him. God help her, she let him. Now she sat in her best friend's kitchen with a blank resume and a baby pressing against her bladder and $0 in her name. That afternoon, Vivian Pemberton called. Grant's mother, 68 years old, with a voice like polished silver, cold and expensive. Tessa answered the phone. Vivian asked for Caroline. Tessa looked at Caroline. Caroline nodded. "Caroline, darling," Vivian said, "I understand you are upset. But let us be practical. Grant is offering a monthly allowance for the child. It is generous, all things considered." "How much?" Caroline said. $3,000. Caroline almost laughed. Grant spent more than that on a single dinner. Vivian continued. "All you need to do is sign a release form. No future claims. No media. No contact with Grant's business associates. Clean and simple." "And if I do not sign," Caroline said. Vivian paused. When she spoke again, the polish was gone. What remained underneath was granite. "Then you will raise that child alone, with nothing, and you will spend the rest of your life watching Grant build a new family with someone who understands the value of cooperation. Think about that, Caroline. Think about what is best for your daughter." The line went dead. Caroline set down the phone. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table until the shaking stopped. "What did she say?" Tessa asked from the doorway. "She said to think about what is best for my daughter." Tessa crossed her arms. "That woman has never thought about what is best for anyone except her son." That night, Caroline sat in Tessa's bathroom at 2 a.m. The faucet dripped. A slow, steady rhythm. She looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. Her face was thinner than she remembered. Pregnancy was supposed to give you a glow. She looked like someone had taken an eraser to her features. She pressed her palm flat against the glass. Her reflection pressed back. "I am not crazy," she said to the woman in the mirror. "He planned this. Every smile, every kiss on my belly, every time he said our daughter, he was already erasing me." The words hung in the bathroom's fluorescent light. They were true. She knew they were true. But hearing them out loud made them sharper. On the 4th day, a man named Bennett Rhodes called. He had found her through the court system. He was a court-appointed family law attorney, which meant his office was above a dry cleaner on Post Road. His suit had a coffee stain on the left sleeve, and his success rate was modest at best. He was also, as Caroline would later learn, the most stubborn man in the state of Connecticut. "Mrs. Ashford," he said, "I reviewed your divorce filing. I have some questions." "So do I," she said. They met at his office that afternoon. The stairwell smelled like fabric softener and steam. His desk was buried under paper. A photograph of 2 teenage boys sat on the windowsill. His sons, he said, when she asked about their mother, he said, "She got the better end of the deal." Bennett was blunt. "Your prenuptial agreement is, on the surface, ironclad. You signed it without independent counsel at age 26. It grants you nothing in the event of divorce, except personal belongings and a one-time payment of $50,000. "I never received $50,000, Caroline said. "I know, that is one of my questions." He flipped through the filing. 342 pages. Caroline had not read past the first 10. "Your husband's legal team buried something interesting on page 312, Bennett said. He turned the document around so she could see. One line item, highlighted in yellow, a reference to a trust. The Russell Pemberton Family Trust, created 30 years ago. "What is it?" Caroline asked. "I do not know yet, but your husband's lawyers mentioned it once and never again. In my experience, people only bury things they do not want found." He looked at her across the cluttered desk. His eyes were the kind of tired that comes from years of losing battles for people who deserved to win. "Ms. Ashford, I will be honest. Your ex-husband has the best legal team money can buy. You have me. My office smells like dry cleaning. I have not won a case against a billionaire because I have never had a case against a billionaire. But something about this filing smells wrong, and I have been doing this long enough to trust my nose." Caroline looked at the trust reference. One line, on page 312, buried like a seed. "Then dig," she said. Bennett Rhodes smiled for the first time since she had met him. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found a reason to fight. Bennett worked for 9 days straight. He called in favors from law school classmates. He filed records requests with 3 county offices. He spent 2 full nights at the courthouse archives in Hartford, sleeping in his car between sessions. Caroline spent those 9 days remembering. That was the cruelest part, not the poverty, not the humiliation, the memories, because the memories had not changed. They were still warm and golden and full of a man who had loved her, except he had not loved her. He had managed her. And now every beautiful memory was a crime scene she had to revisit with new eyes. She remembered the proposal. Grant had taken her to Venice, not the beach in California, the real Venice, with the canals and the gondolas and the light that turned everything the color of honey. He had knelt on a bridge at sunset and said, "I have built empires, Caroline, but nothing I have ever built is as important as what I want to build with you." She had cried. Of course she had cried. Who would not cry at that? Now she sat on Tessa's pull-out couch and replayed the moment and noticed what she had missed. The photographer, who appeared out of nowhere, the professional lighting, the ring that was already sized perfectly. It was not a spontaneous moment of love. It was a production, directed and staged and designed to produce exactly one result: her saying yes. She remembered their first year of marriage, the trips, Paris, Tokyo, a villa in Tuscany for 2 weeks in September. Grant was attentive, generous. He bought her a first edition of her favorite book. He remembered that she liked her coffee with oat milk and a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. He remembered everything. But he also, she now realized, decided everything. Where they ate, where they traveled, which friends they saw. When she visited her mother, it never felt like control. It felt like care. The difference between those 2 things, Caroline now understood, was simply whether you got to say no. She never said no, not because she was afraid, because it never occurred to her that she should. She remembered the nursery, 3 months ago, a Saturday in April. Grant came home with paint samples, 4 shades of yellow. He held them against the wall and asked which one she liked. She chose buttercup. He chose daffodil. They compromised on sunshine. They painted all afternoon. Grant rolled the walls. Caroline did the trim. The radio played oldies. Grant sang along to Motown badly and on purpose. Caroline laughed until her sides ached. At the end of the day, they stood in the doorway and looked at the room. Fresh paint, new carpet, a white crib assembled beneath the window. Grant put his hand on her belly and said, "She is going to have your eyes." That night, Caroline woke up at 1 in the morning. Grant was not in bed. She found him in his study. He said he was working. His computer screen was dark. She did not think about it then. She thought about it now. His phone had buzzed constantly that month. Business, he said. The trips started around the same time. Quick ones. Overnight in Boston, 2 days in Washington, a long weekend in Palm Beach to visit Vivian. And Vivian. Caroline remembered now. Vivian had started visiting more often during the 3rd trimester, not to help with the pregnancy. She never asked about the pregnancy. She walked through the house with her reading glasses on, examining rooms, opening closets, counting things. She was inventorying, cataloging what to take, what to leave, what was Grant's, and what was disposable. Caroline was disposable. The realization arrived not as a crash, but as a slow leak, like air leaving a tire, quiet, steady, until you look down and everything is flat. She sat on the pull-out couch at 3 in the morning. The apartment was dark, except for the light above Tessa's stove. A small yellow bulb that hummed faintly. Caroline pressed her hands together between her knees and rocked forward and back. Forward and back. Her daughter kicked. A sharp one, right below her ribs. "I know," Caroline whispered. "I know." On the 10th day, Bennett called. "I need you to come to my office," he said. His voice was different, tight, like a guitar string tuned too high. "Now!" She took a cab. She could not afford it. She took it anyway. Bennett was standing when she arrived, not sitting behind his desk, standing beside the window, holding a single sheet of paper. "I found something," he said. He laid the paper on the desk. It was a copy of her prenuptial agreement. Not the version filed with the court. An earlier version, the original. "This is from the county recorder's office in Stamford," Bennett said. "Your prenup was registered twice. The first time was 7 years ago, when you signed it. The second time was 11 months ago." "Why would it be registered twice?" Caroline asked. "Because it was changed," Bennett said. "Look at Section 14, Paragraph C." She looked. Section 14, Paragraph C. It read, "After 5 calendar years of continuous marriage, the spouse shall be entitled to 30% of all marital assets, including, but not limited to real property, financial holdings, and equity in any business entity." "This was in my prenup," Caroline said. "This was in your original prenup. The version filed with the divorce court does not contain this clause. Someone removed it." Caroline sat down. The chair creaked. The dry cleaner hummed below them. "He changed my prenup," she said. "Someone changed your prenup? 11 months ago. 6 months before he filed for divorce. They removed the clause that would have given you 30% of his assets. At current valuations, that clause was worth approximately $2.3 billion. $2.3 billion. The number did not register. It was too large, like trying to imagine the distance to the sun. "This is fraud," Bennett said. "Federal fraud. And it means everything filed in your divorce is potentially void." He picked up the paper and set it beside another document, the trust reference from page 312. "And there is more," he said. "The trust officer who administered Russell Pemberton's estate, I found him. His name is Harold Kavanaugh. He is 81 years old and lives in Vermont." "What did he say?" Caroline asked. "He said Russell Pemberton left a document, a letter, sealed, to be delivered to a very specific person under very specific conditions. What conditions? Bennett looked at her. The tired was gone from his eyes. What replaced it was something sharper, something that looked, for the first time, like hope. The condition was this: if Grant Pemberton ever committed fraud against a spouse or dependent, the letter was to be opened. Harold says the letter names someone Grant does not want anyone to know about. Caroline's hands were trembling again. She pressed them flat against her thighs. "Who?" she said. "That is what we are going to find out." She walked outside after the meeting. The sun was brutal. She could feel the heat rising from the sidewalk through her shoes. She walked to the drugstore 2 blocks away. She needed prenatal vitamins. One Tessa had added her to. Declined. One Tessa had added her to. Declined. She had hit the spending limit Tessa had set. Tessa could not afford to give more. Caroline put the vitamins back on the shelf. She walked to the car. She sat in the driver's seat and held her phone. She pretended to scroll through it so the people walking past would not see her crying. The screen was blank. No service. She scrolled through nothing. After 7 minutes, she wiped her face, started the car, and drove back to Tessa's apartment. She did not mention the vitamins. Tessa noticed anyway. That night, a bottle appeared on the bathroom counter. Tessa had bought them on her break. Neither of them said a word about it. The drive to Vermont took 4 hours. Bennett drove a 15-year-old Volvo with a cracked windshield and an air conditioner that worked in bursts. Caroline sat in the passenger seat with her hands on her belly and her eyes on the road. They did not talk much. Bennett was not a man who filled silence with noise. Caroline appreciated that. She had spent 6 years with a man who talked constantly, beautifully, about nothing that mattered. Harold Cavanaugh lived in Williston, Vermont, a small town north of Burlington where the houses sat far apart and the trees grew close together. His farmhouse had white paint peeling from the clapboards and a porch that sagged on the left side. A dog named Chester, old and golden, lay on the steps and did not bother to stand when they arrived. Harold opened the door before they knocked. He was thin and straight-backed, with white hair and eyes that were sharp behind thick glasses. He wore a flannel shirt despite the July heat. "You must be the wife," he said to Caroline. "Ex-wife," she said. "Come in." The house smelled like pine and old books. The kitchen had a wood stove that was cold and a table scarred by decades of use. Harold poured coffee without asking. It was strong and slightly burned. Caroline drank it anyway. Harold sat across from them and folded his hands on the table. His knuckles were swollen with arthritis. He looked at Caroline for a long time before speaking. "I knew this day would come," he said. "Russell told me it would. I just did not expect it to take this long." "You knew Russell Pemberton," Bennett said. "I managed his trust for 22 years. He came to me when he was first diagnosed. Pancreatic cancer. He had maybe 18 months. He wanted to put his affairs in order." Harold paused. He looked at his hands. Russell was not a perfect man. He built his fortune through hard work, yes, but he was not always honest in his personal life. He knew that, and he knew his son. "What did he know about Grant?" Caroline asked. Harold's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted, a shadow passing behind glass. "Russell told me this," his exact words. "I wrote them down because he asked me to. He said, 'That boy has a hollow space where his conscience should be. One day he will destroy someone who does not deserve it. And when that happens, I want to be there, even from the grave.'" The kitchen was quiet. Chester's nails clicked on the porch outside. The coffee maker gurgled and went silent. "Russell created 2 things," Harold continued. "First, a trust. The Pemberton Family Trust. It has very specific activation conditions. If any spouse or dependent of Grant Pemberton is wrongfully deprived of marital assets through fraud, coercion, or manipulation, the trust activates. Full transfer of controlling interest. Controlling interest, Bennett repeated. 62% of all Pemberton holdings, real estate, financial instruments, business equity, everything. Caroline set down her coffee cup. Her hand was steady. She did not know how her hand was steady. Second, Harold said. He stood slowly, walked to a cabinet in the hallway, and returned with a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, thick paper. Russell Pemberton's initials embossed in the corner. He set it on the table in front of Caroline. This letter was to be delivered to the person who triggered the trust. Russell wrote it himself, 3 pages. I do not know the full contents. He sealed it in front of me and told me to guard it with my life. Caroline looked at the envelope. It was cool to the touch, smooth. She turned it over. The seal was unbroken. Dark red wax with the Pemberton family crest. She broke the seal. The letter was handwritten. Russell's writing was precise and small. 3 pages on heavy stationery. She read it aloud. Her voice cracked only once. The letter began, "If you are reading this, my son has done what I always feared." Russell explained that 12 years before he died, he discovered Grant had already shown patterns of financial manipulation. During a brief marriage at 23, Grant had forged his first wife's signature on transfer documents. Russell intervened. He paid off the first wife. He destroyed the evidence. He told himself it was a one-time mistake. It was not. Russell watched his son build an empire of charm and deception. He saw the way Grant treated women, not with cruelty, with calculation. Every relationship was a transaction. Every kindness was an investment. Russell tried to intervene. Grant smiled and said, "Dad, you worry too much." The letter then revealed something that made Caroline stop reading. She stared at the page. The words blurred and reformed. Russell Pemberton had an affair, 40 years ago, with a woman named Colleen Thibodeau, a waitress in Newport, Rhode Island. They had a daughter together. The daughter's name was Margot. Margot Thibodeau, Caroline's mother. The kitchen tilted, not physically, but something in Caroline's perception of the world shifted on its axis. The way a picture looks different when you learn it has been hanging upside down. She kept reading. Russell wrote that he never publicly acknowledged Margot. He provided financial support through intermediaries. He watched her from a distance. When she was 18, he went to her and told her the truth. He gave her money for college. He warned her about Grant. "Stay away from my family," he said. "But if Grant ever crosses your path, do not trust him." The letter's final paragraph was addressed directly to Caroline. "If you are reading this, my son has done what I always feared. The enclosed trust document gives you control of 62% of the Pemberton holdings. He inherited my empire, but I left the keys to someone he would never suspect. My granddaughter-in-law." Caroline set the letter down. Her hands were still steady. She was shaking somewhere deep inside, in a place that hands could not reach. She was Russell Pemberton's granddaughter-in-law. But she was also, through Margot, his biological granddaughter. Grant had married his own half-niece. He did not know it. No one knew it, except Margot. And Margot had said nothing. Bennett leaned back in his chair. For the first time since she had met him, he was speechless. Harold looked at Caroline with something that might have been compassion. "Russell spent $200,000 on legal fees to make that trust airtight," Harold said. "His son's lawyers will challenge it. They will fail. Your father-in-law was many things, but he was not careless." Caroline stood up. She needed air. She walked to the porch and sat on the steps beside Chester. The dog lifted his head, rested it on her thigh, and closed his eyes. His fur was warm from the sun. The field stretched out in front of her, green and gold and endless. A hawk circled above the tree line. The sky was the kind of blue that looks painted. She sat there for a long time. She did not cry. She had run out of tears somewhere, between the drugstore and the Vermont border. Her daughter kicked, strong, insistent. "I know," Caroline said again. "I know." They stayed the night at Harold's farmhouse. Caroline slept in the guest room. The wallpaper had tiny blue flowers on a cream background. The bed was narrow and firm and smelled like lavender sachets. She did not sleep. She lay on her back, which was the only position her belly would allow, and stared at the ceiling. A water stain in the corner looked like a map of a country she had never visited. Her mother knew. Margot knew who Russell was. Margot knew who Grant was. When Caroline brought Grant home for Thanksgiving 7 years ago, radiant and in love and wearing a ring the size of a small planet, Margot knew. Caroline remembered that Thanksgiving. Margot had been quiet, watchful. She had pulled Caroline into the kitchen while Grant charmed the neighbors in the living room. "Something about him feels wrong," Margot said. "You always say that about the men I date," Caroline replied. "He is too polished. Men like that do not change. He does not need to change. He is wonderful." Margot had looked at her daughter with an expression Caroline now understood. It was not disapproval. It was terror. The specific terror of a mother who cannot explain why without detonating her own life. Margot could not say, "He is the son of a man who abandoned me. He comes from a family that treated me like a footnote. I have spent 40 years carrying the shame of being someone's secret." So she said, "Something about him feels wrong." And Caroline did not listen. The baby kicked at 4 in the morning. Caroline put her hand on her belly and felt the sharp jab of a heel or an elbow. She whispered to her daughter, not words exactly, sounds, the low hum of a mother who has nothing to offer except presence. She got up when the sky turned gray. She went downstairs and made toast. Just toast. She stood at the counter eating it, staring at the dark window, seeing nothing but her own reflection. A pregnant woman in a stranger's kitchen, holding a piece of paper worth billions. Bennett appeared at 6. He had not slept either. His eyes were red, and his coffee stain had acquired a twin on the right sleeve. "We need to talk about strategy," he said. They talked over Harold's burned coffee, while Chester snored on the porch. The trust was legitimate. Harold's records, combined with the original prenuptial agreement from the county recorder, created a clear picture. Grant had committed fraud. The trust activation conditions were met. The legal path was there, but Caroline had something else on her mind. "I need to talk to my mother," she said. Bennett nodded. "I think that is wise. But Caroline, be prepared. She has been carrying this secret for decades. That kind of weight changes a person." They drove back to Connecticut. The Volvo's air conditioner died permanently somewhere near Brattleboro. They drove with the windows down. The warm air smelled like cut grass and diesel. Back at Tessa's apartment, Caroline called Margot. The phone rang 6 times. 7. 8. "Hello," Margot said. Her voice was cautious. They had not spoken in 2 years, not since Caroline's wedding anniversary, when Margot made a comment about Grant that started a fight that never ended. "I know about Russell," Caroline said. The silence that followed was so complete that Caroline checked to make sure the call had not dropped. "How?" Margot finally said. One word, barely a whisper. "He left a letter. I found it." Another silence. Longer this time. Caroline heard something through the phone. A sound she had never heard her mother make. A breath that was half gasp, half sob. The sound of a secret finally escaping the body that held it. Caroline, Margot said. I am so sorry. I know. I wanted to tell you. Every day, I wanted to tell you. I know. When you brought him home, when I saw his face, I knew. I knew who he was. I knew what his family was. And I could not say a word because saying it meant admitting what I was, what I am. And what is that? Caroline asked. A coward. A woman who spent her entire life ashamed of being someone's mistake. Caroline closed her eyes. She leaned against the kitchen wall. The plaster was cool against her back. You are not a mistake, she said. And you are not a coward. You were a woman protecting herself the only way she knew how. I should have protected you, Margot said. That was my job. Protecting you was my only job, and I failed. Then come now, Caroline said. Come now and help me fix this. 3 days passed. Caroline filed no legal papers. Bennett prepared the case. Tessa went to work, came home, made dinner, and did not ask questions she could see Caroline was not ready to answer. On the 4th day, Grant appeared at Tessa's apartment. He came alone. No lawyers, no security. He wore a blue Oxford shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Casual. Approachable. The version of Grant that won clients and charmed senators, and made a young law student fall in love with him in a bookshop in Soho. Tessa opened the door and did not move from the frame. Is Caroline here? Grant said. That depends, Tessa said. Are you here to be a human being or a lawsuit? Tessa, please. Caroline appeared behind Tessa. Let him in. Grant sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Caroline had called her mother. He folded his hands the way Harold had in Vermont, but Grant's hands were smooth and manicured and had never known arthritis or honesty. I want to talk, Grant said. About the baby. About us. I think we can work something out that benefits everyone. You changed my prenup, Caroline said. Grant did not flinch. That was the thing about Grant. He never flinched. His face remained perfectly composed, like a painting of a face. I do not know what you are talking about, he said. Section 14. Paragraph C. 30% of marital assets after 5 years. Someone removed it 11 months ago. Grant's jaw tightened, a small movement. Most people would not notice. Caroline noticed because she had spent 6 years studying this face, learning its moods, its lies. You are being advised by an ambulance chaser with an office above a dry cleaner, Grant said. He is filling your head with conspiracy theories. It is not a theory if there is a paper trail. Grant leaned forward. He lowered his voice. Tessa was in the kitchen doorway, but Grant spoke as if they were alone. Listen to me carefully, Caro. You can fight me, but I will take that baby from you. I have judges. I have lawyers. I have money you cannot begin to comprehend. You have nothing, so smile. Sign what I am giving you, and take the $3,000 a month. Because trust me, it is more than you deserve. Caroline's blood went cold, not with fear, with clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally see someone exactly as they are. She stood up. She walked to the door and opened it. Get out, she said. Grant's composure cracked for a fraction of a second. He was not accustomed to doors being opened for him in this direction. He stood, straightened his shirt, walked to the door. You will regret this, he said quietly. I already regret 6 years. What is one more day? He left. The door closed. The apartment was silent except for the refrigerator humming. Caroline walked to the bathroom. She locked the door. She turned on the faucet so Tessa would not hear. She sat on the tile floor with her back against the bathtub, her hands on her belly. Her daughter moved inside her, a slow, restless turning. I will not let him do this to us, she whispered. I promise. She did not believe it yet, but she said it. And sometimes saying a thing is the first step toward making it true. Bennett filed the motion on a Tuesday, a request to reopen the divorce proceedings based on newly discovered evidence of fraud. The altered prenuptial agreement, the hidden trust, financial discrepancies in the original filing. The response from Grant's legal team was immediate. 4 attorneys, 3 motions to dismiss, a counterfiling, alleging that Caroline had stolen proprietary financial data from Grant's company. "They are trying to bury us in paper," Bennett said. "It is their favorite strategy. Overwhelm the other side with billable hours until they run out of money." "I do not have money to run out of," Caroline said. "Exactly, which is why we need to work fast." But fast was not fast enough. Grant's team filed an emergency motion to freeze all trust-related proceedings pending a review of Russell Pemberton's mental competency at the time the trust was created. "They are going to claim he was senile," Bennett said. Was he? Russell Pemberton filed those trust documents 12 years before his death. He also included a cognitive evaluation from 3 independent physicians, all confirming full mental competency. Bennett almost smiled. "Your father-in-law was smarter than your ex-husband." A week after the filing, things accelerated. Vivian Pemberton invited herself to a charity luncheon at the Greenwich Country Club. Caroline was not invited, but she went anyway. She wore the only dress that still fit over her belly, a navy blue wrap dress Tessa had bought at a consignment store. Her shoes were scuffed. Her hair was pulled back in a simple knot. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had been stripped of everything except her spine. Vivian was holding court at a table near the window. 8 women, pearls and pastel blazers and iced tea with mint. The uniform of money that does not need to announce itself. Caroline walked to the table. The conversation stopped. 8 pairs of eyes turned to her. Vivian's smile did not reach her face. "Caroline, no," Vivian said. "What a surprise. I did not realize you were still in the area." "I am," Caroline said. Vivian tilted her head. Performative sympathy. "I heard about your situation, darling. It must be so difficult. Grant always said you were more comfortable in simpler circumstances." A woman to Vivian's left covered her mouth to hide a laugh. Caroline did not look at her. She looked only at Vivian. "Your husband created that trust for a reason, Vivian, and I think you know exactly what that reason was." The table went silent. Not the polite silence of a pause, the airless silence of a vacuum. Vivian's face changed. For exactly 2 seconds, the mask fell. What was underneath was fear, raw and undiluted. Then the mask returned. "I have no idea what you are talking about," Vivian said. "Perhaps the pregnancy hormones are affecting your judgment." Caroline turned and walked away. Her shoes clicked on the marble floor. She did not look back. She did not need to. She had seen enough. That night, lying on the pull-out couch, her phone buzzed. Not her dead phone. Tessa's phone, which Caroline was borrowing. A text from an unknown number. "Ms. Ashford, my name is Nora Gallagher. I am Grant Pemberton's executive assistant. I have worked for him for 9 years. I have information that may be useful to you. Please do not contact me through his office. Please do not mention my name to anyone." Caroline read the message 3 times. Then she called Bennett. "We have an ally," she said. "Who?" Bennett asked. "Someone who has been watching from the inside." Bennett was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "Good. It is about time someone in that building grew a conscience." Nora Gallagher, 38 years old, executive assistant, the woman who managed Grant's schedule, screened his calls, organized his files, and quietly, methodically, for the past 3 years, copied everything. Emails discussing the prenup alteration. Financial transfer records showing assets moved to shell companies. Recorded conversations, legal in Connecticut, as a one-party consent state. where Grant discussed hiding marital property from Caroline. Nora had kept it all, a quiet, meticulous insurance policy. Her motivation was not heroism. It was survival. When Nora's mother was hospitalized with a stroke 2 years ago, she asked Grant for 3 days off. He told her to handle it on her own time. When she returned after taking the days anyway, she found her parking spot reassigned and her office moved to a smaller room. He treats every woman in his life the same way, Nora told Bennett during their first meeting, as something to be used and replaced. The evidence was substantial. Bennett reviewed it over 2 days. When he finished, he sat back in his chair and exhaled like a man surfacing from deep water. "This changes everything," he said. It happened on a Wednesday. Caroline was in the car driving back from Bennett's office. The traffic on Interstate 95 was thick and slow, and the sun was going down. Orange light flooded through the windshield, and for a moment everything was warm and golden, and she almost felt, for the first time in weeks, something like peace. Then the cramp hit. It started low, a tightening that gripped her abdomen and did not let go. She gasped. Her foot slipped off the accelerator. The car drifted toward the shoulder, then the spotting. She looked down, red on the gray upholstery of Tessa's Honda. Not a lot, but enough. She called Tessa. Her fingers were shaking so badly she dialed the wrong number twice. "I am bleeding," she said when Tessa answered. "Tessa, I am bleeding. Where are you?" 95, near exit 37. "Pull over, right now. I am calling an ambulance." Caroline pulled onto the shoulder. She put the car in park and pressed both hands against her belly. Her daughter was moving. Thank God her daughter was moving. Quick, sharp kicks. Agitated. Frightened. "I know," Caroline whispered. "I know." "Stay with me. Please stay with me." The ambulance arrived in 11 minutes. The paramedics were calm and efficient. They asked questions she could barely hear. How far along? Any previous complications? Allergies? 8 months, she said. No complications, no allergies. Please, my baby. At the hospital, they hooked her to monitors. The fetal heartbeat filled the room. 142 beats per minute. Strong. Steady. The most beautiful sound Caroline had ever heard. The doctor was a woman named Priscilla Hendricks. Calm eyes, steady hands. She examined Caroline and explained that the cramping was caused by stress-induced contractions. Braxton Hicks, but more aggressive than normal. The spotting was from cervical irritation. Not dangerous, not yet. But you need to rest, Dr. Hendricks said. Your body is telling you it has reached its limit. If you do not listen, your body will make the decision for you. They kept her overnight for observation. The room was quiet and white and smelled like antiseptic and institutional sheets. The monitor beeped, steady, rhythmic, like a metronome counting out the hours of her life. Tessa arrived at 8 that evening. She brought a change of clothes and a turkey sandwich from the cafeteria and a look on her face that was half relief, half fury. "You are going to slow down," Tessa said. It was not a question. "I cannot slow down. You can and you will. Because if you end up on bed rest, or worse, you will not be able to fight Grant from a hospital bed." Tessa was right. Caroline hated that Tessa was right. At 3 a.m, the hospital was silent, except for the monitor and the distant squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. Caroline was alone. Tessa had gone home to sleep. Bennett had called and been reassuringly gruff. The night nurse had checked in at midnight and again at 2. Caroline lay in the dark and counted heartbeats. 142 per minute. She multiplied without thinking. 8,520 per hour. 204,480 per day. Her daughter's heart had been beating for approximately 240 days. That was 49 million heartbeats. 49 million times her daughter had declared, silently and without fanfare, "I am here. I am here. I am here." A nurse brought juice at 3:15. Apple juice in a tiny plastic cup. Caroline held it in both hands and stared at it. She had drunk apple juice from tiny cups in elementary school. In the cafeteria, with the long tables and the smell of floor wax and chicken nuggets, how simple everything was then. The worst thing that could happen was someone cutting in front of you in line. She drank the juice. She set the cup on the tray. She picked up her phone. Grant's contact photo stared back at her. A picture from their honeymoon, Capri, both of them on a boat, laughing, his arm around her shoulders, the Mediterranean behind them, impossibly blue. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She could call him. She could say, "I am in the hospital. Our daughter is at risk. Please, can we stop this?" He would come. She knew he would come. Grant always came when there was an audience, even an audience of one. He would bring flowers. He would hold her hand. He would say the right things, and then he would use it. The hospital visit, the phone call, her desperation. He would use it in court as evidence that she was unstable, emotional, unfit. She stared at the photo for a long time, the laughing man on the boat. She tried to find him, the real Grant, the one she had loved. He was not there. Maybe he had never been there. She put the phone down. She pressed her hands against her belly. "It is just us," she said to her daughter. "And that is going to have to be enough." The monitor beeped. 142, 142, 142. At 6 in the morning, the door opened. Caroline expected the nurse. It was not the nurse. Margot stood in the doorway. She looked older than Caroline remembered. Thinner. Her hair was gray at the temples. She clutched her purse in front of her like a shield. She had driven through the night. 4 hours from her apartment in Northampton. She had not called ahead. "Before you say anything," Margot whispered, "I need to tell you what really happened. Between me and Russell Pemberton, and why I let you marry his son." Caroline looked at her mother, the woman who had lied to her for 7 years, the woman who had tried to warn her and failed, the woman who had driven 4 hours in the dark because her daughter was in a hospital room with a baby and no one else. "Sit down," Caroline said. Margot sat, and she told the truth, all of it. For the first time, Margot's story took 3 hours. She told it in the hospital room while the monitor beeped and the morning light crept across the floor. She was born in 1971, Newport, Rhode Island. Her mother, Colleen, was a waitress at a seafood restaurant on Thames Street. Russell Pemberton was a regular. He was 30 then, already wealthy, already married to Grant's mother, Vivian. The affair lasted 2 years. When Colleen became pregnant, Russell paid for everything, hospital bills, a nicer apartment, a college fund that Margot would not learn about until she was 18. But he never claimed her, he never visited. He sent checks through a law firm in Providence. To Colleen, Russell was a ghost who paid his bills on time. Margot grew up knowing she was different. Other kids had fathers who came to recitals and fixed bicycles and shouted at baseball games. She had a bank account that grew by itself. "I used to imagine he was a spy," Margot said, "or a pilot who was always overseas. I made up stories to explain why he was not there. It was easier than the truth." When Margot was 18, Russell came to her. He was already sick, thin. His skin had the yellow tint of a man whose organs were beginning to fail. He sat in Colleen's living room, in the same chair Margot's imaginary father had never occupied, and told her everything. His name, his family, his fortune, his shame. He cried, Margot said. This billionaire sat in my mother's living room and cried like a child. He said he was sorry. He said he had been a coward. He said he wanted to give me something, not money. The truth. Russell gave Margot the money for college. He also gave her a warning. Stay away from my family. Vivian knows about you. She has always known. She will destroy you if you come close. And my son is charming and brilliant, and he will one day hurt someone very badly. If he crosses your path, do not trust him. Margot went to college. She moved away. She built a life that had nothing to do with the Pemberton name. She married Caroline's father, a kind and quiet man named Frank Thibodeau, who died of a heart attack when Caroline was 12. She raised Caroline alone. She worked as a librarian. She lived small and careful and invisible. And then Caroline brought Grant home. I recognized his face, Margot said. He looked exactly like Russell, the same jaw, the same way of standing, like the room belonged to him. I knew immediately. Margot tried to warn Caroline, indirectly, carefully, without revealing why. Something about him feels wrong. He is too polished. Men like that do not change. Caroline did not listen. How could she listen? She was 26 and in love, and Margot sounded like every anxious mother who has ever disapproved of a boyfriend. I should have told you, Margot said. I know that now. I have known it every day for 7 years. But telling you meant admitting what I was. Russell Pemberton's secret. His mistake. The daughter he was ashamed of. She paused, her hands twisted in her lap. I spent my entire life being ashamed of something that was not my fault. And the shame became who I was. It became the walls of my house, the shape of my silence. I could not tear them down without tearing myself apart. Carolyn listened. She did not interrupt. The monitor beeped. Her daughter moved. When Margot finished, the room was very quiet. Caroline said, I lost years being angry at you. You had every right. I know, but you were drowning in your own story while I was drowning in mine. And neither of us could see the other. Margot's eyes filled with tears. She did not wipe them away. She let them fall. What do we do now? Margot asked. Now we fight, Caroline said. Together, the way we should have from the beginning. They did not say, I love you. They did not need to. Margot held Caroline's hand while the fetal monitor beeped, and the silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything they had not said for 7 years, full of everything they would say in the years to come. Margot fell asleep in the hospital chair around noon, her head tilted to the side, the same way it always did. On the couch during Saturday movies, when Caroline was little, in the car on road trips, on the bleachers at Caroline's high school graduation. Caroline watched her mother sleep and thought, we are all just people, broken and scared and trying to protect the ones we love, and failing at it constantly and trying again anyway. Caroline left the hospital 2 days later. The doctor cleared her with strict instructions. Rest, hydration, no stress, as if stress were something you could set down like a bag. The next 4 weeks were the busiest of Caroline's life. Bennett filed the amended motion with the new evidence. Nora's records, the original prenuptial agreement, the trust documentation authenticated by Harold and 2 independent estate attorneys, the financial transfer records showing assets hidden in shell companies. Grant's legal team fought back. Motions, counter-motions, depositions. They challenged every piece of evidence. They challenged Harold's competency. They challenged Nora's credibility. They challenged Bennett's standing. Bennett fought them all, one by one. In his rumpled suit, with coffee stains on both sleeves, in his office above the dry cleaner, he dismantled their objections with the methodical patience of a man who had been underestimated his entire career. Caroline, meanwhile, began to remember who she was before Grant Pemberton. She studied, not for the bar exam, not yet. But she read law journals, case studies. She sat at Tessa's kitchen table with a legal pad and taught herself about trust law and fiduciary duty and fraud statutes. Her mind, which had been dormant for 6 years, woke up hungry. She ran, every morning at 6, slowly, carefully, with her belly leading the way, around the block, then 2 blocks, then a mile. She did not run to get fit. She ran to feel her body move through space, to feel herself occupying the world again. She cooked dinner every night, simple things, pasta, salad, soup. She cooked because cooking was an act of creation, and she needed to create something, anything, even if it was just spaghetti with garlic and olive oil. Tessa watched this and said one evening, "You know what scares me?" "What?" Caroline said, stirring the sauce. "You are not angry anymore." Caroline considered this. The sauce bubbled. The kitchen smelled like garlic and basil and something else. Something new. "No," she said. "I am not angry anymore. That is what scares me." Caroline smiled. It was small. It was real. It should scare him too. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in September, 2 weeks before Caroline's due date. Bennett had argued for an expedited timeline based on the pregnancy and the urgency of the financial fraud allegations. Judge Dorothy Kincaid agreed. The courthouse was federal, white marble, high ceilings, the kind of building designed to make human beings feel small. Caroline had been in courthouses before, during law school. She knew the architecture was intentional. Justice was supposed to feel larger than any individual. Grant arrived first. 4 attorneys in matching navy blue suits, Italian shoes, leather briefcases that cost more than Bennett's car. They moved through the lobby like a formation. Practiced, precise. Grant wore a charcoal suit with a white shirt open at the collar. No tie. It was a calculated choice. The tie said power. The open collar said reasonable. Grant was always calculating. Caroline arrived with Bennett and Margot. Bennett's suit was new. Not expensive, but new. He had gotten a haircut. His briefcase was old leather, scratched and softened by years of use. He carried one folder, against 4 attorneys and 12 boxes of documents. Caroline wore a simple black dress. Her belly was prominent. Her hair was down. She wore no jewelry except her mother's ring on her right hand. Margot sat in the gallery. She wore a blue blouse she had ironed that morning. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked at no one except her daughter. Tessa sat beside Margot. She had taken the day off work. She was wearing scrubs because she had come straight from a night shift. She did not care. She was there. Judge Dorothy Kincaid entered at 9:15. She was 62 years old, with silver hair and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck. She had presided over the family court division for 18 years. She was known for 3 things: thoroughness, impatience with theatrics, and an absolute intolerance for lying. This hearing concerns the motion to reopen the divorce proceedings of Pemberton versus Ashford, Kincaid said. Based on allegations of fraud in the original prenuptial agreement and newly discovered trust documentation. Mr. Rhodes, you may proceed. Bennett stood. He buttoned his jacket. He opened his single folder. Your Honor, I will keep this brief because the evidence is straightforward. He presented the 2 versions of the prenuptial agreement. The original, registered 7 years ago, with the 30% clause. The altered version, re-registered 11 months ago without it. He presented the trust documentation, Harold's authentication, the independent estate attorney's verification, the chain of custody from Russell Pemberton's original filing to the present day. He presented Nora Gallagher's records, the emails, the financial transfers, the recorded conversations. Grant's lead attorney, a man named Douglas Fairmont, objected 17 times. Judge Kincaid overruled him 14 of those times. The other 3 she sustained but noted her reservations. The evidence took 2 hours to present. When Bennett finished, the courtroom was very quiet. Then Bennett said, "Your Honor, I have one final piece of evidence. A video statement recorded by Russell Pemberton 12 years ago, intended to accompany the trust documentation." Fairmont stood immediately. "Objection. We have not had the opportunity to review this material." "The video was sealed with the trust documents," Bennett said. "It was only accessible upon trust activation, which occurred when the fraud was confirmed. The Respondents' Counsel could not have reviewed it because it did not exist in any accessible form until 3 weeks ago." Kincaid looked at Fairmont. "Overruled. Play the video." A screen was wheeled to the front of the courtroom. The lights dimmed slightly. A face appeared. Russell Pemberton, thin, gray, wearing a cardigan that hung loosely on his frame. Behind him, a wood-paneled study lined with books. His voice was clear, strong, the voice of a man who had built an empire with his hands and his mind. "My name is Russell Pemberton. I am recording this statement on November the 14th, in the year the trust documents were filed. I am of sound mind. 3 physicians have confirmed this, and their evaluations are included with these materials." He paused. He looked directly into the camera. "If this video is being played, it means my son has done what I always feared. I built my fortune through hard work and fair dealing. My son learned the hard work part. He never learned the fair dealing." Russell's eyes glistened. He blinked. Once. "This trust exists to correct what I know he will someday break. I created it not out of anger, but out of love. Love for the person my son will inevitably hurt, and love for my son. Because perhaps losing control of what he values most will teach him what I could not. That people are not possessions. That marriage is not a business deal. That power without conscience is just cruelty in a suit." The screen went dark. The courtroom was silent. Grant sat very still. His jaw was tight. His hands were flat on the table. His knuckles were white. Caroline looked at him. For one moment, the mask fell. She saw something she had not seen in years, maybe ever. Fear, not of losing money, fear of being truly seen, of being known, of standing in a room where no amount of charm could rewrite reality. Judge Kincaid removed her reading glasses and set them on the bench. "Mr. Pemberton," she said, "do you wish to make a statement?" Grant's lead attorney touched his arm. A warning. Grant ignored it. He stood. He straightened his suit jacket. He opened his mouth to speak, but Caroline spoke first. "Your Honor, may I address the court?" Kincaid looked at Bennett. Bennett nodded. "You may," Kincaid said. Caroline stood. She did not need to. Bennett could have handled this. But she wanted to. She stood and her hands were not shaking. For the first time in months, her hands were completely still. "Your Honor, I am not here to destroy my ex-husband. I am not here for revenge. I am here because in 2 weeks I will bring a daughter into this world, and I want her to be born into a world where the truth matters." She took a breath. "The trust gives me controlling interest in the Pemberton holdings, 62%. I did not ask for this. I did not know it existed until 8 weeks ago. Russell Pemberton created it because he knew something I did not. That Grant would do exactly what he did." She looked at Grant. He was staring straight ahead. His face was a mask again, but the mask was cracked. "I intend to restructure the trust to establish a foundation for women and children affected by financial abuse and divorce. Women who had their prenups altered while they were at ultrasound appointments. Women who were told they deserved nothing. Women who were locked out of their own homes with a suitcase and a dead phone. Her voice was steady, clear. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I will retain enough from the trust to provide for my daughter's future. The rest I do not want. I never wanted his money. I wanted his honesty. Since I cannot have that, I will settle for his accountability. She sat down. The courtroom remained silent for several seconds. Judge Kincaid put her reading glasses back on and looked at the documents in front of her. This court finds sufficient evidence of fraud in the alteration of the prenuptial agreement. The original divorce decree is vacated. The Pemberton Family Trust is activated in accordance with its terms. A full accounting of all marital assets will be conducted. Mr. Pemberton, you are advised to cooperate fully with this process. Fairmont began to speak. Kincaid held up her hand. Mr. Fairmont, I have reviewed your objections. All of them. I have also reviewed the evidence presented by Mr. Rhodes. I suggest you advise your client to spend less time objecting and more time reflecting. She struck the gavel once. In the gallery, Margot pressed her hand against her mouth. Tessa put her arm around Margot's shoulders. Grant stood. His attorneys surrounded him. They spoke in low voices. Grant did not appear to hear them. He looked at Caroline across the courtroom. She looked back. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. Vivian Pemberton, who had been sitting in the back row of the gallery, stood and walked out without a word. Her heels clicked on the marble floor. Each step echoed. By the time the door closed behind her, she looked 10 years older than when she had arrived. The baby came 2 weeks later. On a Tuesday. The most ordinary day of the week. Caroline's water broke at 4:17 in the morning. She was in bed at Tessa's apartment. She opened her eyes to the darkness and the dampness and the sudden, overwhelming certainty that everything was about to change. Tessa drove her to the hospital. The streets were empty. The traffic lights blinked yellow. The world was quiet, in the way it is only quiet before dawn. The labor lasted 14 hours. Margot was in the delivery room. She held Caroline's hand through the contractions. Her grip was strong. Point. At 6:22 in the evening, point. At 6:22 in the evening, Ruth Ashford was born. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Brown eyes that opened immediately and looked at the world with an expression of profound skepticism. The nurse placed Ruth on Caroline's chest, skin to skin. Caroline felt her daughter's heartbeat against her own. 2 hearts. 142 beats per minute and 72 beats per minute. Out of sync and perfectly together. "Hi," Caroline whispered. "I have been waiting for you." Ruth yawned, a tiny, enormous yawn that used her entire face. Then she closed her eyes and fell asleep as if being born was exhausting, which it was. Margot stood by the window. Tears streamed down her face. She did not wipe them away. "She looks like you," Margot said. "She looks like herself," Caroline said. Tessa came in after. She brought apple juice in a tiny plastic cup. She set it on the bedside table and looked at Ruth and said, "Well, she has better hair than Grant already." Caroline laughed. It hurt. She did not care. The days that followed were soft and strange, and full of milk and sleeplessness, and a love so large it frightened her. Ruth ate every 2 hours. She cried at midnight, and at 3, and at 5:15. She made sounds like a small animal discovering its own voice. Caroline held her and walked the apartment in the dark. Back and forth, back and forth. The floor creaked in the same place every time. A loose board near the kitchen doorway. It became a rhythm. Creak, step, creak, step. The soundtrack, of new motherhood. Bennett called on the third day. He had news. The restructured trust was finalized. Caroline now held controlling interest in 62% of Pemberton Holdings. Grant's team had filed an immediate appeal. It was denied. The evidence of fraud was overwhelming. Grant's controlling interest was reduced to 23%. He remained wealthy, but he was no longer untouchable. The fraud charges from the altered prenuptial agreement resulted in a civil penalty of $4.7 million and mandatory disclosure to all business partners. Several deals collapsed in the following weeks, not because of the money, because of the trusts. Partners and investors did not want to work with a man whose own father had anticipated his dishonesty from beyond the grave. Ironic, that word. Trust, the thing he never had, was now the thing destroying him. Bennett also told her about the others. Vivian retreated to her estate in Palm Beach. She stopped attending charity luncheons. She stopped calling. Silence from Vivian was its own form of defeat. Sloane Calloway left Grant 3 weeks after the hearing. She sent Caroline flowers, white peonies. The card read, "Thank you for showing me what strength looks like." Caroline put the flowers on the kitchen table. She looked at them for a long time. Then she called Sloane and said, "Strength is not what it looks like in a courtroom. Strength is leaving before he convinces you to stay." Nora Gallagher resigned from Pemberton Holdings the day after the ruling. She used her savings to start an executive consulting firm. She specialized in organizational ethics. Her first pro bono client was the foundation Caroline was building. Bennett Rhodes, for his part, bought a new suit. Then he took on 3 more cases like Caroline's, women who had been financially erased by men with more power and fewer scruples. He handled all 3 pro bono. When Caroline asked him why, he said, "Because my office is still above a dry cleaner, and I still cannot afford Italian shoes. But I can afford to do the right thing. That has always been the cheaper option." Margot moved to a small apartment in Stamford, 20 minutes from Tessa's place. She came over on Sundays. She held Ruth while Caroline cooked. They did not talk about Russell. Not yet. That conversation would come. But for now, they talked about smaller things. The weather, a book Margot was reading, a recipe for lemon chicken that Margot's mother used to make. The conversations were careful, like walking on a frozen lake. Each step tested before weight was applied. But they were happening, and each one melted the ice a little more. One Sunday, while Margot was feeding Ruth a bottle, she looked up at Caroline and said, "She has your stubbornness." "She has your eyes," Caroline said. "Russell's eyes," Margot corrected quietly. They looked at each other, a long look. "The kind that holds years. Maybe that is not such a bad thing," Caroline said. Margot smiled. It was small. It was real. 6 weeks after Ruth was born, Caroline moved into her own apartment. Small, 2 bedrooms, on the 3rd floor of a building in downtown Stamford. The elevator was slow, and the hallway smelled like someone's cooking, and the windows faced east. East, toward the morning. She stood in the doorway on the first day and looked at the space. Empty except for a few pieces of furniture Tessa had helped her find. A couch from a second-hand store, a kitchen table from a yard sale, Ruth's bassinet, the one Margot had bought, placed beneath the window where the morning light would fall. The apartment was small. It was hers. Caroline carried Ruth inside and set the bassinet down. Ruth was asleep. Her fists were curled against her chest. Her mouth made small movements, as if she were dreaming of milk. Caroline sat on the floor, not because there was nowhere else to sit, because the floor felt solid, real. She pressed her palms against the hardwood and felt the grain beneath her fingers. This was hers, this floor, this light, this life. The first morning, in the new apartment, Caroline woke up at 5. Ruth was still asleep. A miracle. Caroline made coffee. She stood at the kitchen counter and watched the sky turn from gray to pink to gold. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it. Unknown numbers had brought her nothing good in the past 3 months. She read it anyway. Ms. Ashford, my name is Diane. I am married to a man like yours. I heard about what you did. I need help. I do not know where to start. Caroline set down her coffee. She read the message again. Then once more, she thought about the woman on the other end of that message. Sitting somewhere. In a kitchen, maybe. Or a car. Or a bathroom with the faucet running. Holding a phone and waiting for a reply from a stranger because she had no one else to ask. Caroline typed back, slowly, carefully, the way you write something that matters. Start by knowing you are not crazy, and you are not alone. She sent it. She put the phone down. She picked up Ruth, who had begun to stir. She held her daughter against her chest and stood at the window. The apartment smelled like coffee and clean laundry and something else. Something she could not name at first. Then she knew. It smelled like morning, the real kind, the kind that comes after the longest night. Ruth opened her eyes, brown and clear and absolutely fearless. Good morning, Caroline said. The sun came through the window. It fell across the floor in long yellow stripes, like the nursery they had painted in a house that was never hers. But the yellow was different now. It was not buttercup or daffodil or sunshine. It was just light, and it was enough. Caroline did not win because she had a document. She won because she stopped letting someone else write her story. The document was proof, but the proof had always been inside her, in the woman who sat on a curb with one suitcase and refused to break, in the mother who whispered promises to her daughter, in a bathroom with the faucet running, in the voice that said to a courtroom full of strangers, I never wanted his money. I wanted his honesty. Grant Pemberton took everything from her, her home, her money, her name, her peace. He could not take the one thing that mattered, her. She was still here. She would always be here. And the morning was just beginning. Closing disclaimer. All content on this channel is carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with real emotional value and life lessons for our audience.